Okay, so in chapter 7, get ready for a long chapter, but a lot going on, quite a lot of action for people who felt that there's not been enough action up till now. Okay, so there's been a change in Gatsby's home. He is no longer hosting parties, and he has fired all his servants. And instead of his servants, we've got some rather shady people who have been hired by Wolfsheim. They're Wolfsheim family or people who work for him, who are now in Gatsby's home, and they don't even go into the village because they get bribed by tradesmen. They get bribed by people to talk, to gossip about things. This may also be connected to the newsman trying to do an article about Gatsby, but it's we'll discover more why he's sort of become a recluse and is keeping everybody inside his house. So Gatsby calls Nick, and he Nick says, "Are you going away?" He says, "No, but you fired all your servants." And Gatsby says, "I wanted somebody who wouldn't gossip." Daisy comes over quite often in the afternoons, so he wants to keep it a secret. Really the reason why he fired his staff is to protect Daisy from the gossip, and she doesn't want it, doesn't want it getting all around. Um, so who are these people? There are some people Wolfsheim wanted to do something for all brothers and sisters, and they run a small hotel. Okay, Gatsby's called for Daisy basically. Would Nick come to Daisy and Tom's the next day? Um, so he finds it kind of weird. Um, uh, says something was up. Daisy calls later on. They're planning something. And now we have the next day comes and it's extremely hot. Okay, this is New York. This is so you've got high humidity. There's no air conditioning invented yet, so everybody's just dying of the heat, which is a perfect type of weather for people to become irritable and act out and say and do things that they regret later. So he goes on the train, and there's a description of how everything is just covered in sweat. You're just sweating everywhere. It's just awful. And he turns up at the Buchanan's house, and the women are just in the salon, sort of fanning themselves because there's nothing else they can do. Um, and Jordan is there also, and they complain that they can't move because it's so hot. And Tom Buchanan's on the phone, and Gatsby's standing there looking with fascinated eyes. Um, and Jordan says the rumor is that's Tom's girl on the telephone. But and Tom's already saying, no, I won't sell you the car. I'm under no obligations to you at all. As you're bothering me about it at lunchtime, I won't stand that at all. So it sounds like he's not talking to a woman. Um, Tom comes in, pretends to say hi to Mr. Gatsby, but you can see it says flat hand with, he put out a broad flat hand with well concealed dislike, meaning he hates him, but he's pretending to like him. Um, and as soon as Tom goes out the room, Gatsby, um, uh, Daisy kisses Gatsby passionately and announces, and this is in front of Jordan and Nick, and says, I love you. So it's like their relationship has developed and it's much more out in the open. They're taking more chances. I mean, Tom's in the same house, but they don't seem to care. And then in comes, for the first time, we were going to meet her. Well, she's not given a name to begin with, but Daisy and Tom's daughter. So it's this little girl who comes in and she's beautifully dressed. And Daisy says, "Blessed, precious," and she, "Come to your own mother that loves you." Sort of taking her out like she's a little teddy bear or cute little animal. She's not really a person at all, this kid. And she comes in with a nurse. Obviously, most of the time, this kid is being looked after by her nurse. And she shakes hands with everyone. So it's obvious that this little girl is just really something to distract them, to something to show off. Um, And Daisy says all these nice, you dream, you absolute little dream, and that she's so pretty and all the rest of it, but she's not really interested in who she is, not really interested in her as a person. And then the little girl is about to go out. um, uh, And Gatsby is very shocked to see this child. Afterwards, he kept looking at this child with surprise. I don't think he'd ever believed in its existence before. In those days, by the way, they'd call children it, just by the by. It's like it doesn't kind of fit into Gatsby's narrative of this, the love that sort of was on hold, and then he took it up again because there's this child there now, and the child is real. Um, so the child goes off, and Tom comes back with alcohol to cool them down. And Tom suggested Gatsby that he shows him around his place. And Gatsby points out, I'm right across from you. And Tom says, so you are. Hmm, okay. So they eat lunch in the dining room. Um, it's a bit of a tense atmosphere, and they're bored. This is the problem with these super wealthy people. They don't have to work. They don't have to earn a living. So they've got to figure out ways to fill their days. Um, and Daisy says, "What will we do with ourselves this afternoon, and the day after that, and the next 30 years? What do they say? Tsarot shel Ashirim. These people have got to figure out what to do with themselves." Um, and Jordan tells her not to be morbid, not to think about death, which is sort of kind of foreshadowing what's going to be. Um, and Daisy's sort of very upset, and she says, "It's so hot, and everything's so confused." And then she's very restless, and she says everybody should go to town. Meaning, when they say go to town, it means go to New York City. She sees Gatsby and Tom are talking, and Daisy spots Gatsby, and she says, and she's really not hiding it anymore. She says, "Oh," she cried, "you look so cool." Their eyes met, and they stared together at each other, alone in space. Okay, so you can see the deep passion between them. With an effort, she glanced down at the table, and then she says, "You always look so cool." Um, and it says, and she had told him that she loved him, and Tom Buchanan saw. He was astounded. His mouth opened a little, and he looked at Gatsby and then back at Daisy as if he had just recognized her as someone he knew a long time ago. And then she says, "Oh, you look like an advertisement of a man. The advertisement of man. Remember, we talked about advertising, the power of advertising." Um, so Tom breaks up, and he's like, he's willing to have a confrontation. He's willing to have everyone together. He says, "I'm perfectly willing to go to town. Come on, we'll all go to town." And his eyes are flashing between Gatsby and his wife. And it's like, "Come on, let's go." It's like, "We're gonna have some fun," that kind of thing, when you're like, you're supposed to be doing something you enjoy, but everyone's in a really bad mood and everyone just wants to argue with each other. So the women go up to get ready, but it seems that Tom's not very happy about the fact that Daisy had her way, because he says, "I don't see the idea of going to town," broke out Tom savagely. "Women get these notions in their heads." So again, he really seems to feel that women are the weaker sex, that they're full of stupid ideas and they're full of ridiculous things. And then Daisy says, "Should we get anything to drink?" Because of the prohibition, they're not going to be able to get alcohol so easily. So Tom he says he'll get whiskey. Um, and Nick says something very interesting about Daisy. She's got an indiscreet voice. Indiscreet means a voice that tells secrets. When you're indiscreet, you tell things you're not supposed to tell. It's full of, I hesitated. Her voice is full of money, he said suddenly. Um, who says that? Interesting. I guess that was Tom. That was it. I'd never understood it before. It was full of money. That was the inexhaustible charm that rose and fell from it, the jingle of it, the cymbal sound of it. high in a white palace, that the king's daughter, the golden girl. So, so in a way, it's like Daisy represents the American dream. She represents money. She represents all the things that Gatsby wanted, that he dreamed for. It wasn't just her as a person, even though he does love her as a person. It's Gatsby who says it, because Tom isn't there. So Tom has wrapped a bottle of whiskey in a towel to hide it, and they switch cars. So yeah, so he's trying to sort of gain control of the situation in whatever way he can. So he says, you take my coupe and let me drive your car into town. And Gatsby doesn't really like it. And he says, I don't think there's much gas. To which Tom says, plenty of gas. And if it runs out, I can stop at a drugstore. You can buy anything at a drugstore nowadays. That is a hint of something that we're going to find out later on. And it seems that in this exchange, the one person who understands what Tom is trying to say is Gatsby. Um, so uh, so they go off. So Tom says in a very sarcastic manner, "Come on, Daisy, I'll take you in this circus wagon." Sort of not being very nice about Gatsby's car, but it's very interesting. Why would Tom want to be with Gatsby? He's pretty sure that Gatsby's having a thing and is in love with his wife. I mean, what does he have to gain? We're going to find out. That's why this whole chapter is very intriguing about the power games that go on between Gatsby and Tom. So they get off into their cars, and now Tom has an opportunity to speak to Nick, and he says to him, "You think I'm pretty dumb, don't you? Perhaps I am, but I have almost a second sight sometimes that tells me what to do. Maybe you don't believe that, but science." And then he says, I've made a small investigation of this fellow. I could have gone deeper if I'd known. Um, Jordan jokes and says, have you been to like a medium, which is like a person who can tell into the future, is like a spiritual person. Um, so, um, so he says, and you found out he was an Oxford man, Jordan says to him. An Oxford man, he was incredulous, like hell he is. He wears a pink suit. People know that if you wear a pink suit, you didn't go to Oxford. Um, and then, and Tom's just he's not, he says Oxford, New Mexico, not the real Oxford. And Jordan's like kind of annoyed with Tom. Said, well, if you're such a snob, why did you invite him for lunch? Um, and Tom says it wasn't me, it was Daisy who invited him. And everybody's in a really, really bad mood. And then and they pass by Dr. T.J. Ecclesberg's eyes. Remember, we've got these eyes that are a symbol of people being looked at for their moral behavior. Um, and he remembers Gatsby's caution about gasoline. Um, and they stop off. And where do they stop off at to get gas for the car? They go to they see Wilson. Wilson, the cuckolded husband. Cuckolded means that his wife's having an affair with someone else. Wilson doesn't look good. He says he's been sick. He's all run down. And why is he sick? Because he's discovered that his wife is having an affair. And he's decided that he's got to take her away. They've got to get away from here. He says, I just got wised up to something funny the last 2 days, remarked Wilson. That's why I want to get away. That's why I've been bothering you about the car, because he's been bothering Tom about this car because he needs to make money in order to go away. It becomes evident that Wilson has not got any inkling that Myrtle is having an affair with Tom. He just knows that Myrtle is living some kind of a double life. It's very interesting, the difference between Wilson's reaction when he finds out that Myrtle's having an affair, and Tom's reaction when he finds out that Daisy's probably having an affair. That literally Wilson is just sick to his body, sick to his stomach. he can't handle it at all. There's so much power in Tom's money; it allows him to do so much more. And also, if we think about it, one of the reasons why Myrtle has the affair is because of Tom's money, because of all the things that Tom can give her, that Wilson can't.